Good morning, Mr. Cantu. I think we are just about ready to start whenever you'd like to go ahead and call the meeting.
Morning, everyone. Welcome to the Citizens Advisory Committee of the San Joaquin Valley Air Pollution Control District, June 4th, 2024. Declare this meeting open. Roll call.
Good morning. Mr. Cunha?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Harrell? Ms. Lopes?
Here.
Mr. Hofstall? Mr. Fippen? Mr. Savage?
He is here.
Thank you. Mr. Rios?
Here.
Ms. Austin Tibbetts? Here. Mr. Sanders?
Here.
Ms. Deming? Mr. Sanchez?
Here.
Ms. Nebeker? Mr. DeHart? Ms. Holmes?
Here.
Mr. Liba? Ms. Bigby?
Here.
Ms. Agers? Mr. Helm? Mr. Tristo?
Here.
Ms. Fast?
Here.
Mr. Cryer?
Here.
Ms. Morrow? Ms. Matthews?
Here.
Mr. Troost?
Here.
Mr. Delgadillo?
Here.
Mr. Cantu?
Here.
Mr. O'Brien? Mr. Smith? Mr. Medeiros?
Here.
Through the chair, we have a quorum.
Right, thank you. Before we get started, there are some important guidelines and general instructions. Please silence your communication devices. I think that's your cell phones. During the meeting, public participants will be placed on mute, unmuted by staff. Audio members of the public will be unmuted once they are recognized to make a public comment. We're now going to have the Pledge of Allegiance. Chris, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America. Republic for which it stands.
Any questions on the minutes? Bakersfield, any questions on the minutes? Fresno, minutes? Not, but they're them approved as submitted.
Mr. Chair, we do have to call for public comments on the minutes. Are there any public comments in Bakersfield on the minutes?
No public comment in Bakersfield.
Thank you. Are there any public comments in Modesto on the minutes?
Nope. No public comments in Modesto.
Thank you. Are there any members of the public in Fresno that would like to comment on the May minutes? Seeing none, and there are none online. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Okay, let's move on to public comments.
Are there any public comments in Modesto?
No public comments in Modesto.
Thank you. Any public comments in Bakersfield?
No public comment in Bakersfield.
Thank you. Are there any members of the public in Fresno that would like to comment at this time? Seeing none, and then online.
comments online? Okay. Item 7, Executive Director APCO comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I believe you said you had nothing under item number 6, correct? I just didn't want to pass your chair comments item.
Let's skip right over that. Thank you.
I'll turn it back to you, Mr. Chair.
The only comment I wanted to make is that I did have a conversation with Samir and Dr. Cliff regarding some of the concerns that were expressed by the committee at a previous meeting. It was a lengthy conversation. It was a good conversation. I believe that the questions we've been asking are rather complex in response from staff, and that's understandable. But let's see, how do I put this? The ability to answer some of those complex questions are not readily available to staff or the appropriate staff person to answer the complex question is not available at the time of the meeting. So, and that's understandable as well. So there will be better effort on the part of staff and CARB to respond to the questions in a timely manner when available, when that time is available. So I wanted to report that, and I appreciate the fact that I was able to have that conversation with staff. Okay, Samir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, just on that same note, I wanted to also add a bit to that discussion. You know, from my perspective, district staff perspective, we did have a productive meeting, I thought, with, I appreciate the chair, you know, for being willing to take the time to meet with Dr. Steve Cliff at Steve's request, and I think consistent with, you know, what the CSC has been asking for in terms of, you know, good engagement with CARB on a number of different things that have been coming up here as areas of interest for the CAC. Out of that meeting, I felt like there was a strong commitment on the part of CARB, you know, to continue working with the CAC, providing updates as you see here on the agenda, but also returning as needed with agenda items where you could do deeper dives on some of these issues and have the right folks, you know, be here at the meeting to help engage on those issues, and not only when things are already adopted and on the implementation phase, but also as things are also being developed, and there are a number of things that are being developed at the state level. So it was, I thought, a productive discussion. Again, I just want to thank the chair for taking the time to support that discussion, and also Dr. Cliff for reaching out as well. Just one other thing I wanted to mention. Probably noticed that we're off to potentially an early wildfire season in the state. I think fortunately for now, at least, some of the early fires that erupted have sort of been contained, and you know there were some smoke impacts and a lot of conversations happening with the Corral fire up north near Tracy. That's basically been contained at this point. I think it hit about 14,168 acres, so not just about, but exactly. So that I think is 90% contained right now. I just wanted to remind the CAC that we do have a comprehensive, what we call wildfire prevention and response strategy here, where we do try to communicate with the public about what's happening, connect the public with resources. There's a multifaceted strategy, especially when we're seeing smoke impacts. A lot of outreach that's done on various tools that are available to the public with respect to how to get air quality information, whether it's our app or the Fire and Smoke app that EPA puts out there. There are some resources out there. We partner with, and even more so with public health officers throughout the valley, the 8 county health agencies, to see if there's ways that we can have some collaborative efforts on outreach again to residents about what's happening. The schools are a big part of this, you know, making sure the schools are aware of we have the Healthier Living Schools program, where they do rely on us pretty heavily to to get access to information as they think about, for example, outdoor events. Now we're going into the summer, so those dynamics are definitely, evolve, whether it's school's in session or whether, school's out of session. And then we do have some grants available too. And I wanted to also note, kind of within those grants, that we worked with local agencies and local nonprofits to establish clean air centers throughout the valley. And by the way, all this information that I'm mentioning is all available on one page, and I'll give you the URL or the link for that, because you can actually access all this different stuff there on that one page. But there are clean air centers that are established throughout the valley. A lot of these are basically at libraries or other publicly accessible facilities where they have commercial air filtration, and just a place where you can, as a resident, maybe get some respite during some of the wildfire smoke episodes that sometimes will happen here. There's the Clean Air Room grant program, which is basically now open and provides free air purifiers to residents. I know you've heard about this program before, but now that we're getting into wildfire season, it's important, again, that you are aware of this information so you can share it with any of your constituents. It's very simple, streamlined application process, and basically, you just indicate some information, and you can qualify through income or location, basically in a disadvantaged community, and you get a free purifier mailed to your house. So it's very, very, very cool and very high demand program. We also work very closely with our land managers on evaluating what's happening with these different fires. There's also prescribed burning activities. So basically these planned fires to try to provide for reduce wildfire incidents, by basically trying to reduce some of the fuels buildup that's in our wildlands. So we interact very closely with them. We just had what we call the cooperators meeting recently with them to strategize for the upcoming season. We're daily actually interacting with both local, or not just both, but local, state, and federal agencies, and other partners are part of that effort. So that completes my update, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to kind of note some of the things that are happening on the wildfire front as we head into, well, hopefully it's not a major wildfire season, but you all know here that sometimes that can happen. So hopefully it doesn't happen, but it may. So we'll see how this goes, and I'll keep you all posted on that as it develops here into the summer. Happy to take any questions.
Questions?
Samir, how can I spread this good news to our constituents? We have 2 people here from Merced. Oh, we have 3.
What I can do is what I'll do is I'll send a brief email to the CAC members that has maybe one paragraph about wildfire prevention and response. Just kind of saying, hey, there's wildfire season maybe here. Here's some resources and some information, and then I'll have a link to that page I was telling you about. And that way, if you wanted to share that information with anybody that may be interested, feel free to just forward that along to whoever may be interested.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. This is Manuel Cunha. Samir, between your discussion and the chair with Dr. Cliff, was there a discussion about how under their item that CARB has a spot, like in this case, number item 8, is always on our agenda by Laura Carr doing a presentation. The item that is of the biggest hit for this state and for our trade agreements between Mexico and Canada is a big issue. Has Dr. Cliff thought about having a person qualified, as I use the word qualified, knowledgeable, to have on our agenda for this coming season, if I would call this coming season, between now and November, on the truck and bus clean fleet rule, on all of the mandates, the requirements, because many of our rural communities don't have access to Wi-Fi and other things. Was there any discussion about him having a qualified person be a part of the CAC so that we can get an up-to-date what's happening at the ports, what's happening interstate commerce, what is going on between our two trading partners with the trade agreement between the United States and Canada and Mexico. Was there anything about having that person be a regular person on their agenda at every CAC meeting? Do you know if that discussion, because everybody's retired at ARB, it looks like, and we have new folks, which is great, but every time you call, that person cannot speak on the issue. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I can provide a response. I wanted to defer, see if you wanted to weigh in first before I jumped in, just knowing that you were at the meeting as well.
I'll make some comments after yours.
Yeah, so thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, so basically, we talked at a bit higher level than that, but definitely what I heard from Dr. Cliff was a commitment to be at this meeting and to definitely agendize topics that are of interest to the CAC. And so I think what you're saying, Manuel, is that you're interested in having a focused discussion, say on advanced clean fleets. I don't know if there's a couple of other related regulatory kind of implementation issues that may be a part of that as well. So I think it's so you know, as we talk about these issues with the CAC, if there's consensus or if there's strong enough interest from the CAC to have an item on that, because you know, he was there at the last meeting, and there is some follow-up potentially, I think, coming out of that meeting. We also didn't hit on one rule that there just wasn't enough time to cover the second regulation during that meeting. There would be, I mean, the process here would be to try to provide an item on the agenda to talk about those items, whereas this item, which is more of the standing updates on everything that's happening at CARB, and Laura's been, you know, fabulous at coming in and providing those updates. You know, that would be more of just information sharing from CARB in terms of what some of the upcoming activities are. And if there's focused discussions to be had, we'd agendize those items so that we make sure we have the right people here to speak to those issues. And there are a variety of different people depending on the issue that, you know, maybe before the CAC. So there was a commitment at that level. And so I think the question here is, you know, what if there's a specific item that you would like to see on the agenda, you know, what is that item? And then the process would be that, you know, through myself and the chair, that we'd be able to make that request and hopefully get CARB to put that on the agenda. I do know that they would like to bring, you know, more detailed discussions to the CAC. You know, one idea was maybe every so often actually come in and actually have some high level representation come in and actually provide updates on the big things that are going on. That was one of the suggestions that was raised during that discussion. So I'll turn to you, Mr. Chair, see if you had any other or just your own observations about that as well.
Yeah, much of the discussion focused on that very subject. And Dr. Cliff provided some, I thought, a very detailed response. Obviously, Laura, who's a staff person, doesn't represent CARB in the sense of all the information that's available from CARB. As Dr. Cliff explained to me, and because I've been a public staff member for many decades, a lot of stuff that comes before us is not necessarily focused on one particular person or one particular department within CARB. It could involve several departments and several staff members. So I think Samir's response really, I think, depicts on what was suggested, and that's that if there's a item that requires more information, more detailed information, that we agendize it at a future meeting and have a person who can provide more detail appear to respond to that particular question. So, and I think that's a great idea. And I think Manuel's request is a good request. And I think maybe at the next meeting, Samir, if we could have somebody from CARB come and deal with that issue. I know that in the short time I've been as a member here, it's come up several times, and apparently Manuel's not satisfied with the information that's been provided. So can we do that, Samir?
Yeah, I think so. It would just be helpful, I think, in making the request as effective as possible. It would be helpful to know from the members, specifically what regulations and questions are being raised, because there's a number of them. And I think Dr. Cliff at the last meeting had, I think, hit on a few of the different ones. But it's a big topic. So I think the more that, we understand here exactly what the questions are, the better I think they'd be positioned to have the right folks to, kind of focus as well on those issues of concern, of interest. So I'm just going to open it up to, if there's I know it's probably, it's under my item still here, but if there are any more comments or suggestions, either from you, Mr. Cunha, or others, about what exactly you're looking for from CARB, then, we can make that request.
If I could, Mr. Chair,
Go ahead.
on the bodies that I've sat on, we've had at the end of the agenda an item. In other words, we could have before CAC member comments or after an agenda item that basically indicates future agenda item requests. If we had that as part of our agenda, then we'd be in a situation to where specifically each member could make a suggestion as it relates to a future agenda item that could include CARB responding under the circumstances, or whoever depending upon what it is we're dealing with. For instance, if Mr. Cunha had something he wanted to address at the next meeting, that would be the time to request that it be put on the agenda itself, or anyone else.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, we traditionally use that item 15 on this current agenda as a place for that. I think we can probably add, slash suggestions or something on it, just to be clear. But basically, that's essentially the practice that we've had. Now, if there's other items along the way where in that conversation something may come up as well, but it's a great idea, I think, just to make sure everybody here feels like there is an opportunity on the agenda to actually, raise your comments and suggestions, which is item number 15. But again, anywhere along the way, we definitely want to be helpful in addressing, questions or concerns.
Okay. If we can make that slight change on the agenda, that would be great. Let's move on to item 8. Verbal report from CARB. Laura?
To the chair, we had some more member comments here in Fresno.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't hear.
Samir, I was wondering,
Oh, there we go.
based on the wildfires, are there any preliminary indications of the number of violations that have occurred due to that?
Not definitively just yet, Dennis, but fortunately, I think we avoided some major impacts with the early round. I mean, there was definitely some near source impacts. A lot of it stayed aloft, and I think the containment was, wind patterns and containment were pretty effective at kind of avoiding some what could often be very, very big impacts. But so there are definitely some impacts. We saw, some yellow readings and even some orange and a few reds here and there. But I think it's also, fortunately, it was pretty short-lived, especially the Corral Fire up north, which is the one that I think had a lot of potential. Just looking at the CAL FIRE map right now, there's a few other ones that are small and early, and we'll see, where those go. But
Then the second part is the exceptional events. I've been out of the loop on that for a while, but has EPA been receptive to the district's work on identifying exceptional events?
yes, so Mr. Chair, if I could also respond to that, to take a second to.
Please. Go ahead.
Yeah, so Dennis's question around under the Clean Air Act, there's a provision that allows, they're called exceptional events, and it allows areas like ours to take into account the impacts to air quality that come from these things that are called exceptional events. Wildfires are one of those events that qualify potentially as an exceptional event. So you can basically, adjust for the purpose of compliance with the standards, adjust your values, based on how much impact these events had on your values. And so we have a long history of working on this, just because we do have a lot of exceptional events in the valley. Windblown dust events, by the way, are another example of the other big example of the type of event that can cause a lot of uncontrollable impact, essentially, right? Things that are outside of our control, outside of regulation, things that impact us significantly. So we have had some success with EPA. You know, as one example, we were able to show attainment of the 65 microgram 24-hour standard when taking into account the impacts from wildfires. That was just about 2 years ago or so, roughly. We're working on this right now on an ongoing basis because we're hitting, you know, key dates both for ozone and PM 2.5, and the values that we're looking at that you're basically graded on under the Clean Air Act are significantly impacted by wildfires. They're multi-year averages, so we have seen wildfire impacts. So the other significant development on this is that EPA has continued to evolve their policies. There's a new policy now available. This all happened around the same time as the new PM 2.5 standard was promulgated by EPA. As you know, earlier in the year, EPA adopted a new PM 2.5 standard. As part of essentially adopting that standard, given the importance of wildfires in impacting regions and our ability to meet the standard, and just given how strict the new standard is, you know, and at the urging actually of many areas, including ours, that we take a really close look at this, just because of the mismanagement of the forests, the increasing impacts that we're seeing, you know, with extreme heat and other, you know, other related issues, that it was very important for these policies to be examined very closely. And so we're looking at those. We're kind of operating under those right now, not just us, but you've seen this has become a big deal on the East Coast, for example, where Canadian wildfires really woke up, I think, big parts of the country that weren't traditionally dealing with a lot of the same types of issues that we've been dealing with here for a long time. So there's been a lot of, I would say, attention now placed on nationally on how to deal with these types of issues. But I mean, the real question that you've asked here is, where is it really, right, with EPA? And I think time will tell. I think we're going to be working our way through these issues over the next couple of years, and we'll, as we talk about our planning needs and where we are with these different attainment plans that we adopt, a lot of their success, or a lot of the sort of their ability to respond is going to depend a lot on these new policies, and whether or not regions like ours and many throughout the country are actually going to be able to take these fires into account. So we're definitely engaging quite a bit with other states and others, trying to understand, basically how under the new guidance, how do we, ultimately take these into account.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
That was just the answer I needed to hear. Appreciate it.
And CARB, by the way, is a big partner in that as well. That there's a lot of statewide efforts in looking at this as well.
Any other comments?
Yes.
Yes.
Samir, this fire that I think I'm going to probably try to repeat the question that he asked is, do you know if there's any an arsonist involved in this fire that has been publicized?
The short answer is I don't know at this point. I know that there's been some, I don't know if rumor is the right word, but basically some indications perhaps that there's been some level of that, but I don't have any more to report other than probably what you've seen in the media. North, I think here in Madera County, there was some talk about that as well. So we'll keep a close eye on that.
Okay, thank you.
Any more comments? Okay, let's move on to CARB. Laura. There she is.
Hello, good morning.
Morning.
Good morning. This is Laura Carr. I'm an air pollution specialist at CARB in our Air Quality Planning and Science Division. This morning, I just have one discussion item that CARB heard at its most recent board meeting. So just very briefly, that was the proposed amendments to the Advanced Clean Trucks Regulation and the Zero Emission Powertrain Certification Test Procedure. So for this item, the board heard staff's proposed amendments to the Advanced Clean Trucks Regulation, as well as to the Zero Emission Powertrain Certification Test Procedure. And there were stakeholder comments that the board heard, and the board directed staff to address those comments and to bring the proposed amendments back to the board at a future meeting. So that's all I have for the update item, a very quick item this morning. And just just to add to the process discussion that was taking place just a moment ago, as the chair and Samir mentioned, CARB is of course committed to collaborating moving forward to be responsive to any CAC comments. So if there are speaker requests that happen during the meeting, I, of course, hear those during the meeting and I note them down for follow-up. I will say having the request in writing is also very helpful. I know that worked really well with the latest request, and Dr. Cliff was able to come present at the last meeting just to formalize the request and make sure that all of the details of the request are clear so that CARB can respond appropriately and get the correct staff before the CAC. So my email address is always available for that process as well. So I just wanted to offer that and make that point. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Any comments, Chris?
It is now.
Okay. Good morning, Laura. This is Chris Savage. Not related to what you updated on, but I just had a general question for you. Do you have any updates for us on where CARB staff is with the SB 253 GHG reporting requirements?
I don't personally have an update on that. That's something I can note down and have follow-up on. Is that something that I can provide directly, or is that an item that there's interest to bring before the CAC group?
I can't speak to anybody else, but it might be best if you could just send an update to board staff and they can just send it to everybody because there may be interest. I don't know.
Certainly. Yep, I can do that. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Laura.
Any comments in Bakersfield? In Modesto? I'm sorry, Fresno? Public comments?
Do we have any public comments in Bakersfield?
Online?
Thank you. Are there any public comments in Modesto in person?
No public comments in Modesto.
Thank you. Do we have any members of the public in Fresno that would like to comment? I'm seeing none in person in Fresno and none online.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on to item number 9, update on attainment plans and rules.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I'm John Klassen, Director of Air Quality Science and Planning, here to give you a few updates on our planning work and rulemaking work. Firstly, on the planning side, just wanted to give you a couple of updates of some things that have been happening the past few weeks. Firstly, I wanted to give you an update on the 1997 annual PM 2.5 standard. This standard had a deadline at the end of 2023 for attainment for the San Joaquin Valley. However, the year 2023 alone was a very clean year for us, record-breaking for us. We had concentrations below that annual standard across all of our air monitoring sites. So as a result of that, and since we've met all of our plan commitments already for that standard, the Clean Air Act allows us to request a 1-year extension for that standard. And so we've put that request in the CARB. They've submitted their request to EPA. We're asking that we can have 1 additional year to the end of 2024 to meet that standard. So like I mentioned, 2023 was a great year. 2024 has already had a great start to the year, a really clean start. So we have a lot of confidence that we're going into a good pathway to finally attain that standard by the end of 2024. EPA has the request and we're awaiting their official action on that. Just a note here on the 2024 PM 2.5 plan that's focused on the 2012 annual PM 2.5 standard of 12 micrograms per meter cubed. We gave you a comprehensive overview of that plan at the last CAC meeting. Just a couple weeks ago, we posted the final version of that plan for a 30-day public review, and that will go to our board for their consideration in a couple of weeks for the June board hearing for their consideration. So that's coming up soon at our June board hearing. And finally, on the rulemaking side, a rule that's under development is Rule 2520, federally mandated operating permits. I know there's an item on the agenda for this CAC meeting that will give you more details of that rule and what that's looking like in the background, so I won't say too much here, but I'll just point you to that item that'll be coming up later on the agenda to give you that background. And that's it for the update. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions, Modesto? questions in Bakersfield? Questions in Fresno?
Excuse me, but the next board meeting, the 2012 plan, is that what's going to be up for adoption?
Yes, at the June 20th governing board meeting.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, I thought it was a good presentation on that plan. I'd ask through the chair if there's a need for a recommendation from the Citizens Advisory Committee on that plan, the amendments to that.
Do you wish to make a recommendation?
And I could just real quick on that, Mr. Chair. In the past, the CAC has not always, but on plans or rules, has taken a position on those. You know, I think this is one where it has been developed over quite a lengthy period of time, and so if there was a desire by the CAC to take a position on it as far as recommending, say, adoption or other recommendations, you know, I mean, there certainly would be an opportunity for doing that. So it's not a must, and it hasn't always been done. But I think in this case, you know, as per Mr. Treestow's recommendation, it's certainly something that would be consistent with what has sometimes been done. So just want to give a little bit more context to that.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Yeah, I won't go into a dissertation on that, but John, thank you for your presentation. I mean, we're still working on the 1997 plan, and that's still not done. We'll probably still be working on that, and I'll probably be up above looking down, and we'll probably still making amendments to the 97. But I would support Mr. Treestow's absolute recommendation that if the CAC would take a position on this today, I think shows the amount of work with the hearings, the processes, the legal processes that have occurred for this, and the achievements that you guys have done. And this is 2012, and we're still fighting with 1997 plan, SIP, and you've got 6 or 7 of them floating around. So I would move to support that recommendation of Mr. Treestow, that the CAC would take a position and forward that to the board on the 20th of June.
I would second
Okay,
that.
we have a motion. Manuel, would that be a motion? Positive motion or a negative motion?
No, a positive. If we can,
Okay.
if we can make it through one SIP in our lifetime, that will be an accomplishment. So it's a
Okay, we
positive
have a
motion.
motion.
Positive.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion. Is there a second?
There was a second by Mr. Treestow.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Roll call.
I'll call for public comments first. Are there any public comments on this motion in Bakersfield?
No public comment in Bakersfield.
Thank you. Are there any public comments in Modesto on this motion?
No public comments in Modesto.
Thank you. Any members of the public in Fresno like to comment on this? Seeing none and none online, I will call for roll on this motion. Mr. Cunha?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Okay.
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Ms. Lopes?
Yes.
Mr. Savage? Mr. Rios?
Yes.
Ms. Austin Tibbetts?
Yes.
Mr. Sanders?
Yes.
Mr. Sanchez?
Yes.
Ms. Holmes?
Yes.
Ms. Bigby?
Yes.
Mr. Tristo?
Yes.
Ms. Fast?
Yes.
Mr. Cryer?
Yes.
Ms. Matthews?
Yes.
Mr. Troost?
Yes.
Mr. Delgadillo?
Yes.
Mr. Cantu?
Yes.
Mr. Maderos?
Yes.
To the chair, motion passes.
Thank you.
Miss Jamie Aggers has not been called.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't have her as attending. Ms. Eggers?
Yes.
Thank you. Sorry about that.
Go ahead, Chris.
Mr. Chair, want to explain my abstention. It's not that I object to the plan, because I think it's a good plan and I've taken the time to read it. I just don't know that it's good practice for this board to take a position on a document that's not actually presented to us. I think that needs to be done before vote is taken. It's a good plan. The decision made is wholly appropriate, but I think if you're going to take a position on a plan like that, the plan should be presented, or at least a highlight of the plan.
Good point. We can count your vote as a yes.
You can count my vote as an abstain based on the procedural issue, but yes, it's still a good plan.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. All right. If there's no other comments, let's move on to item 10. Consider recommendations from CAC Subcommittee for Hearing Board appointments.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of CAC, Morgan Lambert, one of the Deputy Air Pollution Control Officers here at the district. As you'll recall likely from last month's meeting, one of the roles of the CAC that the governing board has put forth is that when we have vacancies on one of our state mandated hearing boards, that the CAC will provide the recommendation to the board on potential applicants to fill those vacancies. And so at the last meeting, an ad hoc subcommittee was created to vet the candidates for the two vacancies that we currently have, an alternate public member and a primary engineering member in our Southern Region Hearing Board. Those interviews with potential with applicants, the potential candidates, have been had, and before you in your packet is the unanimous recommendation of that the ad hoc committee. And so what would potentially need to happen today would be for the CAC, if you so desire, to confirm those recommendations, and then that recommendation would go forth to the governing board at the next meeting in terms of the official recommendation from the CAC on applicants to fill those vacancies. So with that, perhaps I could turn it over to Manuel or one of the other ad hoc committee members if they wanted to share any of their perspectives on the candidates.
This Manuel, I would let any of the members of the committee, if they have any comments before we give our recommendation, I would definitely open that up as well as you suggested, Morgan. So I'll take a second to see if there's any of the members of the committee that wish to make comment or thoughts at this time.
Through the chair, Dennis Treestow. I had the opportunity to speak with both of the individuals on this recommendation list, and to the entire committee. I think that Noel Penner, as an engineer, displayed great knowledge of the Air District, its rules, regulations, and procedures for the hearing board. Maria Welts was, I took her as the public member that I think we would like to see on a board. She'll raise questions from a public perception, and I got that view from her as I was speaking with her. So I would urge the approval of these candidates for the hearing board membership.
Well, Morgan, Mr. Treestow did a great job from the standpoint of the committee, and absolutely I had the same discussions with that, and it's great to have when we're able to talk with people like that, and their interest is solid and genuine, and they come from a wealth of knowledge in different levels, even from the standpoint of the engineer, but Maria especially, even from where she was and grew up, and et cetera, et cetera. So at this time, the committee unanimously made those two recommendations as Mr. Treestow has stated. So I guess what we would say, we would move this forward if it's approved by the board to the full board on the 20th of June, but that would be our recommendation.
Or do we call for a motion to approve the recommendation, Mr. Chair? If so, I would make that motion.
Right, we have a motion.
I would second. Okay.
Sorry, beat you. All right.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, I'm going to call for public comments on this, and then I can call for the roll. Thank you. Any public comments in Bakersfield on this item? Bakersfield, do you have any public comments on this item?
No public comment in Bakersfield.
Thank you. Any public comments in Modesto on this item?
No public comments in Modesto.
Thank you. Are there any members of the public in Fresno that would like to comment on this item? Seeing none and no online comments indicated, I'll call for roll. Mr. Cunha?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Okay.
Thank you. Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Ms. Lopes?
Yes.
Mr. Savage?
Yes.
Mr. Rios?
Yes.
Ms. Austin Tibbetts?
Yes.
Mr. Sanders?
Yes.
Mr. Sanchez?
Yes.
Ms. Holmes?
Yes.
Ms. Bigby?
Yes.
Ms. Eggers?
Yes.
Mr. Trusto?
Yes.
Ms. Fast?
Yes.
Mr. Cryer?
Yes.
Thank you. Ms. Matthews?
Yes.
Mr. Troost? Mr. Delgadillo?
Yes.
Mr. Cantu?
Yes.
Mr. Maderos?
Yes.
Through the chair, motion passes.
All right. Thank you. Move on to item 11, report on 2023 through 2024 winter residential wood smoke reduction strategy. John.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Again, John Klassen, Director of Air Quality Science and Planning, joined by Jamie Holt, Chief Communications Officer. And we'll give you this overview of this last winter season, which ran from November through February. So just a little bit of background here on the public health impact of wood burning. As we know, there's a lot of research that links wood smoke inhalation with different health issues, lung disease and decrease in lung function for children, hypertension, heart disease, heart failure, neurological effects can happen as well. And that image on the right-hand side just shows that the smaller the particles are that you're breathing in, they can get deeper into the lungs, they can enter the bloodstream and cause a lot of health issues. Residential wood burning is one of the largest emission sources during the winter season. So getting those reductions from wood burning are really important for our wintertime air quality. And in addition, during the wintertime, we often have what are called temperature inversions, which can really compress that smoke down near the surface in neighborhoods where it's being emitted, where people are living. So this is a really important program for us. This is also a really cost-effective program in terms of the amount of emissions reductions we get versus the cost of implementing it. We've been doing this for a long time, over the decades, and this has led to us attaining a number of air quality standards along the way that we have a list here. Just some examples. This program has helped us attain the PM10 standard many years ago, set at 150 micrograms per meter cubed. We've attained the 65 microgram standard that Samir mentioned earlier in the meeting. This program has been a big help towards that. We're making significant progress toward meeting that 15 microgram annual standard, and that's the one that we're asking for that 1 year extension that I mentioned is 1 more year. We're getting really close to meeting that standard. And this program is also helping us make progress towards meeting the other PM 2.5 standards, the 35 microgram 24-hour standard and the 12 microgram annual standard. Just highlighting a few notes here on what we saw this last winter season, some of the great stats and milestones that we hit. During the 23-24 winter season, we saw record low average concentrations of PM 2.5 across the Valley's counties. We had 0 days exceeding that higher threshold of 65 micrograms per meter cubed. This is the 5th winter season in a row we have not gone above that level, which is really great. We're seeing that continued improvement in air quality. We saw a record low number of days that the Valley exceeded the 35 microgram annual standard as well, so good progress there. And we wanted to note here too that this was the first time we saw 0 exceedances of that 35 microgram standard for the months of January and February, which is great to see that we've crossed that threshold. About 95% of the days during the winter season across the Valley's counties were meeting the PM 2.5 standard. So it's just the 5% that we have those higher concentrations that we still need to make progress on shaving those down, getting those lower to meet all the PM standards. We saw a lot of good and moderate air quality index days. Those are the green and yellow days. We saw a lot of those during the winter season, which was great to see. Minimal orange and red days. And the speciation analysis, which I'll show in a couple slides, continues to show good progress in reducing some of those key components of particulate matter. This is the 5th winter season that we've implemented this hotspot strategy where we have lower curtailment thresholds for the counties of Madera, Fresno, and Kern. Those were counties that were seen to need more emissions reductions to meet the PM standards, so we have lower thresholds. You can see on the right-hand side of that graphic the thresholds we work with for those counties versus the other counties. And we've continued to implement that over this past winter season. There are a lot of numbers here in this table, but just wanted to direct your attention down to the bottom, the highlighted row. That's this latest winter season, and you can see the number of no burn declarations per county. You can see the counties listed at the top from San Joaquin over to Kern County. Overall, if you go all the way to the right-hand side, you can see across the valley's counties, there were fewer curtailment declarations compared to some of the previous years. So just showing this was a good winter season, good air quality, and that resulted in us having to call fewer wood burning curtailments. I mentioned the air quality improvement, so this is the way we can look at it through the different colors of the air quality index. Good is green, moderate yellow, unhealthy for sensitive groups is orange, unhealthy and above is red. So if you go all the way to the left-hand side, you can see in the past, about 23 years ago, we saw a high number of orange and red days during the winter season. And if you look towards the right-hand side, you can see those orange and red days decrease significantly through the period, and then those green and yellow days continue to increase, where if you go all the way to the right-hand side, the vast majority of days are green or yellow, meeting the health standards. And it's just those small percentage of days that are orange or red that we still need to make progress in cutting those down. We wanted to show this here as well. It's not just in general the air quality is improving, but the time of the day that we're seeing improvement. This is an analysis we put together for this winter season report. And this shows the concentrations by hour during the evening hours from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. And there's a number of curves that you can see on this chart here. The curve on the top, that is about 20 years ago during the 2002-2003 winter season. You can see during the evening, we saw concentrations on average from 40 to 55 micrograms. And you can see kind of that peak from 8 to 9 p.m. before it continues to decrease into the early morning hours. As you go forward in time, you can see that curve kind of continue to come down over time. So we're not seeing those high peaks that we used to in the past, and that peak itself is flattening out. You can see over time that we're not seeing that big signature of wood burning activity during the evening hours, that it's flattening and it's becoming lower. So this was really great to see that over time that evening signature is not as prominent as it used to be. And just a note on the meteorology during the winter season, we often track this compared to past years. In general, the months of November and December were more stable, which means that's more conducive for PM 2.5 to be formed and to be trapped near the surface. So November and December weren't great months for us for dispersion. That's when we had our more challenging air quality. Then January and February were more dispersive, some more storms coming through. So it's kind of a balance between the two of some bad months for dispersion and some good months. And overall, our air quality was still really good, even with those challenging months of November and December. And lastly, before I pass it to Jamie, just a note on the speciation analysis. PM 2.5 is made up of a lot of different components, and it's complex, but two of the big pieces that we track closely are organic carbon and ammonium nitrate. Those make up the two biggest pieces of wintertime PM 2.5. And we track this over time as well, and you can see that over time, when we look at the past, on the left-hand side of this chart versus the right, you can see both of those components of organic carbon and ammonium nitrate continue to decrease as this program has been implemented and become more stringent over time. And at this point, I'll pass it to Jamie to give us an overview of our outreach and incentive program efforts.
Good morning. The success of this program is really built on a multi-pronged strategy. And one of the key elements is the incentive program. Our incentive program allows individuals to swap out, change out their either open hearth fireplace, their old wood burning stove, or their wood burning insert and replace it with a cleaner, more efficient model. In most cases, that's usually a gas device, a gas insert, a gas stove, although we are seeing more people take advantage of the program and replacing their wood-burning device with electric heat pumps. The incentive dollars really vary depending on what you're replacing and what you're putting in, but it goes up to as much as $5,000 for those folks who are going from a wood-burning device to electric heat pump. So there's an incredible value in it. It also allows people to use their devices more during the year than they would normally otherwise get to with that old wood-burning device. In the last calendar year, we issued over 3,000 vouchers totaling over $11 million. Just in this past winter season, we were at about 1,400 vouchers at about $5.5 million. And since 2009, when the grant element of the program really took off, we've issued over 30,000 vouchers, with that being a little bit more than $64 million. One of the next components to the strategy is really education. And we really want the public to understand that when we're looking at burning your fireplace, using your outdoor chimenea or fire pit, which is also limited under this rule, using your old wood stove, really the person you're impacting most are those people living in your home. Wood smoke tends to go up, out into your neighborhood and then right back into your home, or really smoke out those folks in your neighborhood. We've really emphasized that public health impact of wood burning through our program messaging, and we really want residents to understand that when air pollution is expected to deteriorate, because we have some of these stagnation periods that John was mentioning, we want to provide them steps not only for what they can do to abide by the rule, but what they can do to protect their own health and that of their families. We encourage people to upgrade through our grant program, and then we use a strategic coordination of both our earned, paid, and posted media. That's our social media, our websites. We do have paid advertising to make sure the public's aware of this program. We used to call this program the Check Before You Burn program, but really we're moving away from that just to call it our residential wood smoke reduction program, because we want people to get away from using their basically wood burning device at all. As we look at some of the PM standards that we have to reach, it makes more sense for folks to really do away with all wood burning. As I mentioned, we invest in traditional bilingual advertising on cable TV, network TV, outdoor billboards, streaming services. We do quite a bit of social media. We do search engine marketing and the kind of on-demand streaming services such as Hulu. The search engine marketing allows us, if folks are looking for, let's say, upgrading their fireplace, they'll actually see our grant program, so we can direct that fairly easily. We do have a smartphone application that folks can download that will give them the month or the daily burn status for their county. And then we do multiple press releases, and the burn status is also listed on many of our evening news weather reports. These are the statistics for the last season. We had over 3,400 public inquiries to our 1-800-SMOG info line in both Spanish and English. We had just over 250,000 folks visit our wood smoke reduction webpage. We received nearly 300 direct public complaints for suspected wood burning activities, and total impressions through all of our outreach was about just under 54 million. These are just some examples of our outreach for everything from our TV commercials, which were part of a Believe It campaign, where we were getting folks to see that they really could get a significant amount of money by going into our grant program, social media, billboards, just a whole variety of outreach to get the word out to the public so they can understand that we do have the grant program, that there is the program that regulates when they can use their wood burning device, and understand why it's so important to limit the amount of wood burning that we do. The last part of our strategy is compliance support activities. Our number one goal is really to educate folks about the rule. And when we go out to do enforcement, we want to make sure that we are responding to those complaints that are made. We do this nights and weekends as needed. We spend about 3,500 staff hours on proactive monitoring and complaint response. We issued nearly 500 notices of violation. Those get a $100 penalty, but you can cut that penalty in half if you go to our very exciting district smoke school. Think of it as traffic school. And there are higher penalties for those few repeat offenders. I will tell you, for most folks, once they get educated on the importance of this rule, it really is something that they take to heart, and many then even look at possibilities of upgrading their devices. We utilize low light image technology that really allows us to see smoke coming out of a chimney or out of a backyard with there being a chimney or a fire pit. We don't go on private property. We don't knock on doors. And all of this is really a part of increasing public awareness, support, and compliance with the rule. Looking ahead, we have a new public opinion survey. We do a public opinion survey every several years, and we'll be updating that, hopefully looking to launch that in this next wood burning season to see kind of where we are with the public's attitudes towards wood burning. We work closely with our community organizations to make sure that they're receiving the education that we're putting out regard to residential wood smoke. We're looking to further outreach to promote the heat pumps and other zero emission technology, especially in light of new federal funding opportunities and challenges. These include electrical costs, home limitations, equity issues. We want to make sure that everyone has the ability to have some of this new technology in their home. We want to explore new research regarding where exactly our PM 2.5 is coming from and making sure that we're understanding the wood burning contribution. And are there enhancements that need to be made to this rule as part of our attainment plan for the PM 2.5 standard, and even looking at the brand new standard that was just recently released. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Mr. Chair, just a closing quick comment. Wanted to, for context again, remind the CAC that this has been a standing item for quite some time on the CAC agenda, and the reason for it is, well, it's a couple of reasons. One of them is that it's a pretty big strategy in the Valley. It's one of the big contributors to the PM concentrations, but also has been one of the biggest sources of emissions reductions that we've been able to get over the years as we keep working with our residents to reduce wood burning. As we've developed this strategy all along the way, the CAC has every year has looked at this. There are going to be some regulatory discussions coming up, so it's really a flag. Also, we'll be sharing that information with the CAC, but also between the opinion survey, the outreach on the grant programs, and just the ongoing input from the CAC. This is an ever-evolving strategy. And I wanted to note that the equity issues are increasingly an area of concern for us as we look at some of the heat pump technology, the funding, the mandates that are in front of us with the new PM standard. As we think about transitioning away, say, from wood burning, one of the things that we're very concerned about and that we want to keep a really close eye on is making sure that residents do have an ability to transition away, and that we're basically not being overbearing on residents that may not be able to deal with that transition. So there are provisions within, for example, our rule for rural communities, foothill communities, and others, that the prohibitions actually don't apply in those areas. For example, it's really urban focused and where you have access to natural gas. So it's really important to understand it's a multifaceted strategy that's got different balancing factors that are going on, and it's just an important topic for the CAC, and you've often provided a lot of input on where we go from here, kind of thing. So just want to give you a little more context as well as to the purpose of the item. And if you have any feedback either now or you're going to see some of these items coming back to the CAC as well as they get developed over time, whether it's the grants or the regulatory approach or other parts of it, you'll hear more in the future about it as well. So I'll turn it back to you, Mr. Chair, and CAC members. We're happy to take any questions or comments.
Any comments in Modesto? First.
Thank you for a very nice presentation, but now I'm going to see if I can get away with this. I'm going to apply for a grant to give me an electric home heater. But once I get the grant, I said, no, I don't think so. I think I'll buy it and I'll sell the heater to someone else. Can I get away with it?
That's a test.
The answer is no.
Never mind, I'm not going to buy it.
Good idea.
I'd also like to say thank you for the very informative report. And one particular area that was a concern to me, which was helpful in the information, is that fire pits are also included under this, because in our area, we're seeing that these seem to be quite popular, and how we can help get the word out to the public about the risks and the alternatives that are available, I think is very important. Thank you.
All right. Chris.
Thanks for the update. It was really good presentation. And I'm sorry if I missed it, but how much grant money is available for the next winter season? Do we know that yet?
Chris, I'll get you an answer to that shortly, but it's, yeah, we have it in our spending plan for the new budget that I will have you an answer shortly. I think it's I want to say it's in the $15 million range, but I'll get you a more specific answer on that.
Okay, thanks.
Comments in Bakersfield?
Is Orchel. I do have a question. I know you have incentives for converting your fireplace into gas and stuff, inserts or whatever. Is there any incentive for people who take out their fireplace out completely, if they choose to do so?
Yes, if you just want to remove your fireplace and make it inoperable, and we have some very specific language on what that means, you can get $750.
Okay, what's the reason I was asking is I did that myself personally. I got a big flat screen TV in this place, but I just how is that retroactive? You have to show a picture of it before and after, or how does that work?
Yeah, basically the way it works is you do have to have the voucher in hand ahead of the what we call the project, right? So whether it's that or whether it's buying an insert, it's not a rebate program. It's a grant program. So basically you have to, get approved up front. And so in the case of somebody who's either already done an insert or in this case, done the permanent, what do you call it? There's a term that we use, permanent disabling of the device. You wouldn't qualify unless you had an approved voucher up front.
Thank you.
Okay, any comments in President?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I have a comment. A couple, maybe John or in the document, if I remember the discussion of all of this from day one when we started with the fireplace, in those areas where we don't have the ability with power and we have a lot of disruption, we have a elevation of 3,000 feet, I believe, that those folks don't fall somewhat into that. So we had the discussion about propane. I notice in all the documents, it doesn't mention propane. It only mentions gas. Is that still available to have propane? Because the reliability of utility is not there, okay? So they use wood for a major purpose of warming, for heat. One of the three of you.
I can speak to it real quick. So there's a couple of different pieces to that. So on the regulatory front, if the area does not have access to pipeline natural gas, that area is not subject to the regulatory prohibitions, right? So when we call a no burn day, that only applies to parts of the valley, which is really where the majority of residents are, but parts of the valley where you actually have access to pipeline natural gas. So there are many rural communities, though, or foothills where you don't have access to natural gas, and so you're not subject to the regulatory component. Now, you are able to take advantage of the grant program. So if you want to upgrade your wood stove to, say, a natural gas / propane, which they work with propane as well, you can upgrade your device to propane if you live in the country, even if you're not subject to the regulatory prohibition. And so there are So and we'll see the mix. We'll see people upgrading to wood, pellet stoves or, inserts or other technologies based on what works for that, particular household.
Okay, so we do have that flexibility to where, and I like that slash propane.
And one other note is that we don't fund any wood in areas that are in urban areas that are subject to the regulatory prohibitions. We don't fund any wood. That's going back several years now. So it's only propane or now you got me confused. Natural gas or electric in those cases.
Okay, right, excellent. Because I look for that little word, propane, and I look at the elevation for folks where power is a real problem. And so, and mainly in those areas is for heat and for warmth. So again, I want to commend Samir, Jamie and John and the entire team. I think you guys have done one omen's job as an air district in the 8 counties of outreach. I mean, we hear of it on the farms. We hear about farmers that talk about their home that they have, and they're 82 years old and figuring out how to go out and cut the peach trees, the old ones that are dying, but being able to do that. So I really commend you've done a tremendous job, just like the famous tune-up car program. So I commend you. Excellent job.
Just a quick question, and you answered a lot of it, Samir, as far as the distinction with urban areas and other areas. I mean, are we leading to a ban in urban areas eventually? I mean, is that where we're going here?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, so right now it's not a ban, but as the standards get more stringent, so now we went, for example, from an annual standard of 12, which is the subject of the plan that earlier was discussed. The new standard is now 9 micrograms, right? So it's going from 12 to 9. It's a very difficult standard. So I think there's a couple of years between now and having to pull the plan together, say, for that standard. But as we study, PM 2.5, where it's coming from, and if we continue seeing that a significant portion of that comes from residential wood burning at these peak urban locations, right? I think there's going to be a lot of questions around, what's next for the strategy, right? Now, I do have to say that this whole approach, and that's why we call it a comprehensive approach, outreach, grants, regulatory enforcement. It only works to the extent residents comply with it and support it. So everything has to sort of move forward together, in our opinion, in order for this, to get to whatever that next stage is. So right now it's not a full ban. I mean, there's certainly, especially on a bad winter, the winters can vary based on weather, how stagnant is it, other factors. But when you have a really stagnant winter, big portions of the winter are actually no burn days. And we've had those types of winters the last couple of, not this last season, but the year before that was an example of where, big parts of Fresno, Kern counties, others that were seeing these really bad conditions. I want to say about 80% of those days were essentially no burn days in those counties, right? Northern counties maybe had more flexibilities because of some of the different weather conditions that we'll see in different parts of the valley. So I think it's going to continue to get evaluated, and I think there's going to be more enhancements in the future as we all wrestle with how to deal with the new PM standard.
And doesn't it seem like the public is more amenable to that possibility as far as a ban is concerned? Because I know most new homes aren't even built with fireplaces anymore. And I equate it somewhat to roofs. I mean, shake roofs were popular 30, 40 years ago until they were banned. And then systematically they've been replaced and you hardly see them anymore. And fireplaces are somewhat similar to that. It was the center of the living room, and it's not that case anymore most of the time.
That's a great question, Mr. Chair. Just a little bit more on the response on that. That's why the public opinion surveys have been really critical in the past, and we have seen opinions change significantly on this issue over the years. There's a lot more, I would say, not just even tolerance for what we're doing here, but even support, much stronger support for continuing to look at ways to phase it out, reduce it. Obviously, with some equity considerations in different parts of the valley where, there's just, it's just difficult. I grew up in rural Madera County, and, definitely, rural Madera County is very different than, say, the heart of Fresno in terms of, different things that you have to think about. But, I think that's why we want to do the surveying keep doing the science, really make sure that the outreach and we have a good feel, kind of our finger on the pulse of where the Valley is on this issue. And I think when you look at this as being probably the most cost-effective strategy that we've ever implemented to reduce PM 2.5, and you think about what else we have to do really to meet these standards, often with good education, good discussion, good science to back it up, what you'll find is that most people seem it's a very reasonable thing to do, especially when you have grants and you have solutions for those pressure points where residents may have some concerns. So it is something that continues to evolve in that direction, but we do have to do it in a very, every one of these facets, I think, has to be looked at very carefully along the way.
I would think one of the things that would have to be looked at and considered would be that disadvantaged or poor communities would be disproportionately affected by this, right? Especially with the cost of electricity and gas.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, through the chair, this is a phenomenal report, and the work done by the district is phenomenal. I was taking a look at the decrease in evening PM 2.5 concentrations, and just to highlight that for the CAC membership, the significant decreases across the board, but especially in the early morning hours where we have the propensity to have the inversion layers. To get this type of reduction when the inversion layer is predominant in this time I won't say it's unbelievable because the data is right here, but I think that's great. A information request that I have, and it goes partially to the exposure exhibited by disadvantaged communities, is I'm aware that there's population exposure data. Do we have data on that for these various areas where the exposure and the health risk, if it's elevated or not, for disadvantaged communities? Or
I think that's a very complex question. I think we can maybe have to think on that a bit, and maybe we could do a deeper dive into exactly what you mean by that. But what we do have is, first we have the air monitoring network,
yes,
which is very extensive. When we develop a new plan, there's a lot of modeling that goes into that plan. And so we break the whole valley up into small, what we call grids, and we try to project basically forward, what concentrations look like everywhere basically in the valley. And we can use those tools to try to look at things like population exposure, which is where we've actually seen, using that kind of methodology, we've seen some really significant reductions in population exposure. Even when we may not be in attainment of a standard, right? Because the way that this all works is that basically you find the single most difficult location anywhere in the entire valley, right? And until that location meets the standard, technically the whole valley doesn't meet the standard. But all along the way, what you're seeing is very significant reductions in concentrations, both for ozone and PM 2.5. And so looking at population exposure reduction is a very useful tool in understanding things beyond the simple question of, simple if I might call it that, but the simple question of whether or not the whole region is meeting a standard. So I think that there is information available, and some of that's even published on our webpage, through different tools that we put out there. But to this question of, exactly which community is exposed to what, where's it coming from? There's some complexities involved depending on exactly what, where you're heading with that. I'm happy to have a discussion with you about that to see if there's any way to connect some dots on that based on what your interest is on that.
Thanks. That answers my question.
You got it.
Any other comments? No? Okay. Do we need public comments as well?
Not on this item, only on items we're calling a vote for.
All right, thank you. Item 12, update on proposed amendments to District Rule 2520. Brian?
Morning, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. I'm Brian Clements, Permit Services Director, and I'll be going over these proposed amendments to Rule 2520, federally mandated operating permits, otherwise known as our Title V permitting rule. First, a little background on Title V. Title V comes from the Clean Air Act. which is the comprehensive federal law that regulates air emissions from stationary and mobile sources. It requires major sources of air pollutants and certain other sources to obtain a Title V permit and operate in compliance with that permit, which are, and the requirements are codified in the CFR, Code of Federal Regulations, 40 CFR Parts 70 and 71. Part 70 is applicable to state authorities, local authorities like the Valley Air District, and tribal permitting authorities. And then Part 71 is applicable when EPA is the permitting authority. So the district's approved Title V program, or Part 70 program, is contained in our Rule 2520. And permits issued under this Rule 2520 are referred to as Title V permits. So the reason, diving into the rule amendment, the reason the rule is being modified is to remove the emergency affirmative defense provisions. These provisions state that an emergency arising from unforeseeable events and can constitute an affirmative defense for noncompliance with technology-based limits. The removal of these provisions come from a court case that concluded that these provisions exceed EPA's statutory authority. And since then, EPA has removed those provisions in numerous programs and regulations. And then in July of last year, EPA removed the emergency affirmative defense provisions from their Title V operating permit program regulations, which became effective in August of 2023. And then local permitting authorities like the Air District must submit program revisions to the EPA to remove these Title V emergency affirmative defense provisions by August 21st, 2024, a year after the effective date of EPA's rulemaking. So the actual amendments that we're proposing here are to remove that section as directed by the EPA, section 13.4 in the rule. And that's to ensure that the rule now conforms with EPA's operating permit regulations in light of that recent action. And then while we have the rule open for amendment, we're making an administrative update, which is to change the term Title I modification to federal major modification. And this is for consistency between district and federal regulations. For example, our primary permitting rule, Rule 2201, our new source review rule, no longer uses the term Title I, but instead uses federal major modification. And this change has no impacts other than term consistency. So those are the two changes that we're proposing to make in the rule. And since this is a rule amendment process, it involves a public process. There was a public workshop held in March of this year. The proposed draft rule was published in April. It's been discussed at a variety of public meetings, and there's been ongoing opportunities for the public to provide input throughout this entire process. And to date, there have been no comments received on the proposed rule. And we plan to present this rule to the governing board at the next board meeting in June. And that concludes my presentation. With that, I'll turn it back over to the chair for discussion or any questions and comments.
Any comments from Modesto? No comments from Modesto. Bakersfield? Comments in Fresno?
Through the chair, I have a comment. Has the district done any analysis on about potential effects on regulated sources here in the valley with this rule change?
To our understanding, these emergency affirmative defense provisions haven't been used. So we think moving forward, we think there'll be little or no effect on regulated sources.
Can you give an example of what an emergency affirmative defense may cover? Is that like earthquakes or something?
Yeah, anything out of the control of the operator, such as a natural disaster, maybe something that puts control equipment offline, and there's excess emissions based on that.
Okay. Yeah. Are there any other remedies for I know this is off topic a bit, for a regulated source if they have an emergency and they go out of compliance and they're no longer able to use the affirmative defense?
Yeah, the district has a process. So in addition to this regulation, the district has its own set of breakdown and emergency provision rules that have always needed to be complied with. In fact, one of the stipulations of using the current existing Rule 2520 emergency provisions is the source needs to comply with all district rules and regulations, which includes breakdown procedures.
Well, my understanding of this is it's mandated by the federal EPA, and to keep all of our sources in compliance, this rule needs to be passed. So I recognize that, and thank you for the explanation of what remedies regulated sources will have after this is implemented. I don't have any other questions. You've answered my questions to the fullest.
Mr. Chair, through following up with Dennis's discussion, Samir or any of you folks, have you implemented the emergency provision, or has it been used during the earthquake of Los Angeles, say at that time and point, or when we have had extreme conditions such as floods or earthquakes, even on the west side, and damage has occurred, or to facilities? Has there ever been a use of this to where we've had various emergencies out of our control that have impacted businesses? The flooding has definitely caused, when we do have bad flooding, it has caused problems for businesses and operations. Even when the floods have created to where it has destroyed poultry facilities and or dairy facilities. And I don't agree with Title V at all. I think we've been fighting that since 1991, 92, under equivalency. I think all of our rules, it's just a way to grab money by the feds and for EPA to be involved. So I don't agree with Title V at all, because all of your rules go beyond what Title V in some cases does. But my concern, or question, not concern, is under these provisions, are we under the using the exceptional events issue for fires, etc., that you can subtract that from your mandates? Has there been anything done with the emergency provisions of under the conditions that we've had over the past years, from the earthquakes of Los Angeles, or even the west side, or even the floods that we've had in the 2007 time or 1997 floods that have really caused havoc for businesses that are permitted? Any comment, or does this?
Yeah, to our understanding, these provisions haven't been used at all by any Title V facilities. As you alluded to, so Title V, the purpose of it is to add monitoring, record keeping, and reporting requirements to permits, especially for states and districts that don't have requirements like that. In general, in most cases, district rules are more stringent than federal requirements for all those topics. So we think, this rulemaking doesn't have much of an effect on any permits or sources moving forward. All district rules have monitoring, record keeping, and reporting requirements. We have emergency and breakdown procedure related rules. So in general, our district rules cover the situation.
Super, thank you.
Okay, if there's no further discussion, let's move on to item 13, AB 617 implementation updates. Stephanie.
Hello, good morning, everyone. My name is Stephanie Ng, and I'm a program manager in our Community Strategies and Resources Department, here to provide you an update on AB 617 implementation since our last meeting. Just as by way of background, CARB has selected 4 communities that we work with, Fresno, Shafter, Stockton, and Arvin-Lamont. And each of these communities has developed a community emissions reduction plan that we're working with the Community Steering Committee on. This CSC is what we call it. They're made up of residents, businesses, community-based organizations, agencies that are in the area. So a few exciting updates that I have for you all is at the end of May, we had a successful in-person lawnmower exchange event in Stockton, where residents brought in their older mowers to be dismantled, and we gave and they picked up a brand new electric lawnmower. These are wildly popular events in the community. Residents are really excited, and we were really excited to have the opportunity to connect with a lot of residents about the programs that we have here at the district. We have another event this coming Thursday for our Arvin Lamont community. All 200 mowers that we have available for the event are reserved, so we're really looking forward to it and hoping to stay cool. As you all might know, the weather's a little warm, but we have lots of things prepared to keep staff cool. So we're really looking forward to the event. We are really excited also that our passenger vehicle repair and replace programs are open for all of our AB 617 communities. Valley Can, or Valley Clean Air Now, who helps administer the program, is hosting local weeknight events for each of the 617 communities. Monday, so just yesterday, they held an event in Stockton. 120 people showed up. And so there's a lot of interest and a lot of, I think, need for these community-centered events. They are making their way through all the other communities and also communities outside of our 617 communities throughout June. And finally, we are very much looking forward to the district's inaugural Community Clean Air Day. I believe you all have heard updates about it, but just as a reminder, the goal of this day is to bring together communities really all across the valley to collaborate with one another, learn stories from each other, and really find ways to bring opportunities and resources to our communities most in need. So again, this event is happening in downtown Fresno on Saturday, June 22nd. And those are all the updates that I have from the district. And unfortunately, CARB was unable to make it today due to a training that their team is in. So they'll be providing updates through the clerk via email. With that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Stephanie, this is Ben Cantu, the chair. I have a question. On the lawnmowers that program, is that open to residents and or commercial?
Thanks for that question. We have two separate programs. We do have a program that's geared towards residents, and then we also have a commercial program, our zero emission lawn equipment program.
Okay. And the one in Stockton was residents?
Correct. That one was geared towards residents, kind of changing out their, the mower that you might have in your own homes. They brought their older mowers to be dismantled and then picked up a new one. But yeah, that's for kind of like in-home use or lawn use anyway.
So what's the difference between the residential and the commercial program?
The commercial program, we're thinking about big pieces of equipment, ones that businesses might use. So kind of big pieces like ride-on mowers. So things that are more of kind of the commercial grade. Whereas, the pieces that we're thinking about at home, much smaller scale use for, again, kind of the, your lawn at home.
Okay.
Thank you. Just want to add that, so the commercial grade equipment is substantially, as you would imagine, like the price points start going up and they last longer and there's extra battery packs and things like that. So there's some extra considerations for the commercial side.
Okay. Any questions, Modesto?
Through the chair,
questions in Bakersfield?
Through the chair, it's Les Clark. On the program, my question is that we received a notification of an updated community air protection incentive guidelines. And it's over 200 pages of information or requirements or discussion. And my concern is that we first started out with this program, we had the ability to, through a workshop or whatever, to discuss some of the issues that the Air Resources Board had in their plan. And I'm not aware of any public meeting that afforded us that opportunity. There's over 200 pages in this updated document that I would be interested in finding out what the Air District interpretation is, as well as CARB. Unfortunately, they're not here. This is a CARB, bringing it back down to the district. So I'm concerned about that. And I think your prior discussion as far as putting something on the agenda prior to, this would be one of those that I would not want to spend a whole lot of time on, but I would certainly want to touch base because the intent of this and from some people is not just lawnmowers. It's more than that. It's to get it potentially involved in the permitting process. And the program itself has expanded from 2 or 3 blocks to parts of the county. It's become a big program on its own. So I think for us to say, well, that's just a good program about lawnmowers, that's not true. So I'd be interested in hear the response from, the San Joaquin Valley folks, and then I could wait until CARB shows up next time. But that's something of concern, and I think for you people that are representing your communities, this is something you need to be aware of. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Through the chair, this is Jessica Olson, if I can answer
Yes.
Les's question. Thank you. Jessica Olson, I'm the Director of Community Strategies and Resources. Les was just speaking about the Community Air Protection Funding guidelines or CAP funding guidelines. I know that Brian Moore, who's typically here throughout the past really about a year, talked about sort of the iteration that CARB went through to amend those guidelines and add just additional types of measures that can be funded with the state funding, which is what we call the CAP funding that comes down for this program for incentives. I believe throughout all that process, he did mention a handful of the workshops that they held to discuss the draft and then the final versions of these guidelines. I'll just also mention that the district has been, to your point, certainly closely monitoring, and we were very involved in the update to the guidelines, which really just expands the types of measures like low dust harvesters and alternatives to agricultural burning. Those things used to not be allowed to be funded through this program. And so it really allows us to expand the types of funding into the types of communities that we've been working with, and really understanding the needs in the respective sort of rural versus urban communities that we work with was really an opportunity for us to make the funding go a little bit further. Though to your point, Les, we will definitely make sure that we touch base with with Brian Moore, the representative from CARB, just to see if there can be maybe a more expanded discussion from them. I can't speak for CARB on that process and what is really contained in those guidelines.
All right, thank you. If there's no further discussion, let's move on to item 14. Outreach and Communications Report. Jamie.
Hello. So we've been working on some of these big events that we have already been discussed. The Lawnmower Exchange event, we've got another big one on Thursday, keeping everyone cool, the priority for that one. We also are kind of wrapping up what's been a very busy few months with everything from Air Quality Awareness Week to Earth Day to Bike to Work Month, which we just wrapped up in May. We've been out at a lot of events, and thank you to any of you who happen to stop by our booth and say hello to us. We have just published the English version of our annual report to the community. The Spanish version is close to being in office. Once we have both, we'll make sure that everyone gets a copy sent to them of both the English and Spanish version. The English version is online, and Spanish will be following very shortly. It's a great overview of all the progress. We had a really good year last year, and it talks about a lot of our grant programs, a lot of air quality improvement. It has a lot of really nice graphics and messages within it with photos from the valley. So it's an easy way for the public to kind of get a snapshot of all the great things that we do around here. As you all know, because I think it came out of either a board meeting or this meeting, we also have a mention of the work that the CAC and the EJAG does. I think maybe that was the chair's suggestion when we presented this to the governing board, actually, now that I think about it. As we move into wildfire season, Samir mentioned a little bit of the work that we'll be engaged in. We actually have a meeting with public health officers this Friday, and we'll be making sure that we have everything kind of ready to go, which it's so early, but ready to go for when the bulk of wildfire season hits. And with that, I'll open it up to any questions.
Any questions of Jamie?
Mr. Chair, excuse me,
Go
this
ahead.
is Manuel. Jamie, excellent book. I think Simmer, you guys and the team, I think did a lot of pictures, a lot of things in there rather than a lot of words. You do have graphics of all types of great things.
Love pictures. Right?
Yeah, the pictures are just incredible. And some of us look a little older than what you really did. So next time you have to do a little better job on that. So that maybe a little makeup or something to help, so, you know, would be a very, because it's too glossy. But again, well done again for your team and everybody putting those together, and the different things that we do with your public relations department is really super. And when you have the Spanish version, I do know that I would like to get that out. Number two, Samir, I don't know if you folks, I would absolutely send that to our entire Valley delegation of congressional people. And I would absolutely would like to forward, or we will send a copy to the Secretary of Agriculture so that he can see the relationship of what team partnershiping is about and how we can reduce and do great things to clean up our air, to help our rural communities especially. But I think this document, you couldn't beat it. Pictures are a lot of words there, and but I think it needs to go to our delegation because of the importance you do there, and it is a good document. I just can't say I wish I could say something about CARB in that relationship. I think that may be a document that would have to use a truck to haul it. Samir.
No, Mr. Chair, I just wanted to know, I mean, I actually keep one on my table because I actually refer to it on a pretty frequent basis. It's a really good document. I'd encourage all the CEC members to read through it. I think it's a great source of information, and shout out to the Jamie and her team. It's an award-winning report now. There was a Valley-wide public relations society, Central California, that provided an award actually for the report itself. So I think it's actually on the title of the report. And I look at this report as a reflection of the Valley's work, right? And so I just, you know, we talk about it with pride because of the pride that we have and what the Valley continues to try to do when it comes to cleaning up the air in an effective way, you know, using sound science, common sense, and the values that we have here. So
accolades, Jamie, for the entire team and all of you. I don't know how else to say it, but you guys, or gals and guys, have done a tremendous job. And Samir, you're right. And whatever we can do to support that award, you let us know. But again, many thank yous for that.
Any other comments? Okay. Item 15, CAC member comments. Let's start in Bakersfield. Anybody in Bakersfield?
No comments in Bakersfield.
Okay.
We're here, but no comments. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody in Fresno?
I'm going to turn it to my colleague first, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Tristo, to go.
I was going to make a request that in the August meeting, if we could have a brief presentation or even some information before the meeting on regional haze. I've noticed that the EPA has made some action or published action in the Federal Register on regional haze. I think it would be an educational item for us on the board.
Anybody else?
Yes, this is the process in which Samir and Mr. Chairman, you had met with Dr. Cliff in requesting a process of the Clean Fleets bus and truck mandates that we have a presentation, and by August, I'm maybe two parts. If we run into a series of problems of movement of goods in this valley in June and July and August, I think it's unprofessional to tell us to call a 1-800 number and talk to a person when we have a disaster, which we cannot get our DMV tags because they're tied in with the other 800,000 truckers that are trying to register, do a smog check, and pay $30. I think this issue warrants a person that would have the ability to where anybody from the CAC or even from the districts had an issue, they came to them, they would be able to immediately go to this person's and be able to try to figure out the problem. Case in point, last week, a grower had a 1,000-mile truck in the program of ARB. They can only drive 1,000 miles a year. Specifically uses the truck to haul fruit from the farm to the packing house on a public road, a county road. He hasn't figured, or we haven't figured how to drive throughout the farms on the dirt roads. When called DMV, there was a hold on that farmer's 1,000-mile DMV tag. The hold was ARB, Truck Division, Clean Fleets Division. When they called, they were number 2,700 on the queue. So the farmer's going to have to figure out how the fruit is going to wait. This week it's 105 degrees on Thursday and Friday, Saturday maybe. So we're going to go out to the orchard. We're going to tell the fruit to hold on until I get ARB to release the hold. But there is no reason for the hold, I guess, because of the complexity of the problem. But this is no joke, and this is a serious issue. And last week we had one. During our annual meeting, we had last Thursday in a work session, 5 growers complain of the same problem. Called DMV, they have a hold, the hold is at ARB. Again, the 1,000-mile truck permit. So when you call the 800 number, I think we're calling out of the country because the person has no idea. They'll take your name and number and your vehicle number, and that's it. Our fruit is not going to wait for some person to call back and say you're number 1,000 or 11,000 because you got 800,000 other truckers signed on to the mess. So this issue has to be addressed, and we have to have a standing agenda item on this if we're going to worry about the movement of goods, products. But I'm dang well concerned about my farmers because we've eliminated all the tier 3 trucks that were on their farms, and they have to go all with tier 4s or go buy a $500,000 electric when there's no hookups. So,
Okay,
Mr. Chairman,
Daniel.
this is a big issue. So I don't know where you want to go with this, but this was my opportunity. Apparently, I'm told that I can talk about this, was during the members' comment. So now I'm making a request of you, the chair of this committee. How do we proceed forward to where we have a standing issue and we're able to continue to have direct dialogue with ARB on this important issue revolving around our movement of goods? Thank you.
Thank you, Manuel. Samir?
Yeah, so if I understand it, just to summarize, the rule that Mr. Cunha is referring to, I believe the truck and bus regulation with the 2023 date and the SB1 mandated registration holds that can come from CARB based on implementation of the rule and that law that added that enforcement component to the rule. So we can communicate. I mean, if just looking around the room and looking to you for direction, Mr. Chair, I think per the process that was outlined, and consistent actually with past practice as well, we can certainly communicate an interest from the CAC to CARB in wanting to get an update on the implementation of the truck and bus regulation, particularly as it pertains to the 1,000-mile, the exemption provisions and some of these issues that are coming up, holds that are hard to, basically no understanding as to why the hold is there, and the process by which maybe a constituent may be able to get some help in addressing that. So I think we can try to capture that in an email. And if you're okay with that, Mr. Chair, if others support that, we're happy to see if they can come back and talk about that.
So, Mayor, can we have a body show up and have that discussion with Manuel? Because he's raised this issue a number of times, and we really haven't received an answer to satisfy Manuel. Can we have somebody show up at a meeting, future meeting next month, following month, and respond directly to Manuel's questions?
Yeah, I think consistent with what I just said, I think we can certainly request that CARB come on those specific issues. If I misstated them, Manuel, what I just said, let me know. Or Mr. Chair, if you heard something differently from what I think Manuel had tried to indicate was his concern, we can communicate that concern and request that CARB be at the next meeting to speak to that concern. As to whether they're able to, who that is, and all that, I mean, we can certainly see how that goes with CARB.
Okay. Anybody else have any comments?
For Modesto? Are you asking for Modesto?
I think I asked for Modesto.
Oh, no. No.
No? Okay, Modesto.
I do have a comment. It's on. Earlier, Chris brought up SB 253, and I wasn't quite aware of what that was until I did a quick search. And I do feel that if nobody knows what SB 253 is, it's definitely something that we do need to be made aware of. It is going to affect many businesses in California because of that new rule. And so I would recommend at this time that we do have that as a topic for discussion at one of our sooner than later meetings, so that we can understand what we are all going to be required to report here in the new future with this new rule.
Mr. Chair, just to make sure I capture. Yeah, thank you. Sorry, I didn't mean to get ahead either. Just reading your mind. So is that a CARB enforced requirement?
I believe it was passed by Governor Newsom, but in reading the rule, they're putting it on CARB to be kind of the holding place of the greenhouse gas emissions in the scope 1, 2, and 3. And it pulls in all private businesses. Obviously, you have to have a certain threshold, but most of us in farming could easily hit that threshold, where federally only private companies report and they don't get into scope 3. I think they only get into scope 1 and 2. So this is something that is future, but needs to be addressed. And I believe it also pulls in anybody doing business in California that meets that amount would have to report these things, where federally they wouldn't be required to.
Okay, thank you for that. So we're certainly happy to, again, per CAC direction, request that CARB perhaps come in and provide an update on where they are with implementation of SB 253. If that's okay with you all.
Yeah, and Samir, I'm sorry, just to supplement what Denise said and Wyatt, CARB has an obligation to have their implementing regulations in place. It was supposed to be June 1. Obviously, that's not going to happen because for businesses, it's a beginning January 1, 2025, reporting 2026. They have to do public reporting for their GHG emissions on 1 and 2. That's why I was asking the question, because CARB has not been very clear about where they are with their regulatory development process, and that's really what I'm most interested in.
Appreciate that clarification. And one thing I want to note, and Manuel, to your point, and because I think we're still trying to figure out the exact best way to put some of these priority issues out to work with CARB on them. Laura did offer, she provided some clarification as well, that in addition to this item on the bottom of the agenda, I think during the CARB update, it sounded like Laura was also willing to take back, specific requests like these. So I think and maybe in future meetings, we can probably also, you know, raise these issues. This is my suggestion, but raise these issues during the CARB update item. And that way, if Laura through CARB can perhaps, you know, make sure all the questions are answered in that moment. She also suggested in writing. So I think we'll definitely try to capture what I'm hearing from the CAC in writing as well. But you're all more than welcome individually also to try to capture your specific concerns in writing so that we don't miss any questions that you may have, you know. But I think based on today's meeting, those are two that I'm hearing so far that we need to follow up with, and we'll work with the chair to get those to the CARB representatives to try to be here for future meetings.
So we would have, for instance, as an example, item 8A that would specifically state future CARB requests from the CAC?
I think we can do that. I don't think I don't think as currently drafted, it's limiting your ability to do so. I think as it's currently written, I think you can still do that without 8A, but if need be, you know, we can add that to the agenda as well. Yeah.
Well, that way it wouldn't be overlooked as far as what could be done at that point. That's the only reason I suggest.
Yes.
Any further discussion from anybody? If not, you know, I do have a question or a comment. Is there a written procedure for the CAC for raising motions and voting on a particular subject? The mayor?
Well, it's the bylaws point to I think Robert's rules, and it is a Brown Act body, and so basically between those two things, you know, it's essentially what governs, you know. So for example, you can't take action on items that are not on the agenda. I mean, so there are Brown Act requirements that would apply, and every year or so we do actually go through those requirements. We do refresher items and training on that, and I don't know exactly when that's coming up, but we're more than happy to look at that and give you an update, Mr. Chair, on, you know, when we can go through some of that again with the CAC.
So does the Brown Act apply to us?
It does, yes.
It does, okay.
Yes.
And what was the other one?
Robert's rules.
Robert's rules
of order.
So do we get to pick one or the other, or both?
Well, yeah, some of it's got to do with form and process, right? And then there are some legal kind of guardrails, if you will, through the Brown Act. I mean, there are definitely things you can and can't do under the Brown Act, and then Robert's rules kind of fill in the blank or fill in the gaps in terms of just trying to explain sort of how the two might work together. And you know this better than I do, having served in you know, public service for many years. But basically, yeah, but the Brown Act is ultimately the legal framework, you know, that the CAC has to operate under.
I think that's what I was getting at, because Robert's rules don't work as well when it comes to public type meetings. So, okay, that answers my question. Anything else? I think we're done.
Thank you all very much.
Item 6, sorry, through the chair, item 16.
Yes. Volunteers to present report during governing board meeting. Who's going to do that? Any volunteers?
If you can't, Mr. Chairman, I'll be happy to do it.
Do you really want to do that, Manuel?
Oh. It's already all done. You just have to read what they write for you, so we're safe. You're safe too. You're safe, Chairman. I won't go outside the box.
I just want to make sure we don't get into a war here or something. Manuel, would you do that for us?
I'd be very happy to, sir.
All
Under
right.
those guidelines,
Thank you.
yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Meeting adjourned.